Here at Manga for Dummies, we don't discriminate. As long as you're an entertaining product, there's a chance that I would give it a shot. Korean webcomics are no exception. For a while now, we've seen a rather significant amount of high-quality Korean manhwa, usually defined by incredible art, above-average settings, and okay storytelling. By giving up on the traditional manga paneling, Korean webcomics are able to provide some things that aren't commonly seen, such as color. Slave B is a Korean webcomic that first started releasing in 2020, written by Ins and drawn by Park Ji, and originally published by Kakao. You may be wondering why of all possible manhwa out there, Slave B is the first one being covered. For the most part, feature series are often on either end of the spectrum, either being the cream of the crop or the bottom of the barrel. In comparison, Slave B is the perfect example of mediocrity. While nowadays the word mediocre seems synonymous with other words like bad, garbage, and horrible, but really if we look up the definition, mediocre falls closer to the words like average and middling. Slave B is a series that does things right for the most part, but it's rather clear that it doesn't have any particularly charming quality to it. Let's talk a little bit about Slave B. In this world of swords, magics, and demons, there is a caste system with there being nobles, commoners, and slaves. In accordance to the title of the series, our main character Nero is of the slave class, having suffered injustices and pains that would break most mentally and physically. In his quest to improve the lot of his life and those of his sisters, he seeks to make it big in the world through the Academy. While not necessarily copy-pasted from any other series, it isn't hard to find analogous stories to Slave B. There are a good reason why Slave B is not a straight-up bad story though. There are some rather redeeming qualities, especially early on. Nero's physical and mental endurance when facing tough situations and his journey to the bottom rungs of society into higher echelons is for the most part riveting. The stress of his life situation and how he chooses to handle things was admittedly a good read. In the same way that most of us enjoy a good revenge story, Nero's journey to improve his lot was satisfying to enjoy. The art, while not on the level of some of the other popular names out there, does have a distinctive style that can at times create powerful images with heart-pumping action, even though for the most part it does fall on the average side of things. At its best, Slave B can be quite a feast for the eyes, but for the most part, it does just enough to not be repulsive. Up till now, the Slave B that has been described to you would probably fall into the good pile if there existed only two piles, but it has some glaring storytelling issues that hurt the series enough to the extent that at the end of the day, mediocre is probably the best word to describe Slave B. Moving away from Nero, there is a rather colorful suite of characters. I say colorful not because they are particularly well written, but mainly because all of the minor characters only differ really by their hair color. If there was one word other than mediocre that I would use to describe the story beats of Slave B and its character developments, it would be predictable. Slave B incorporates tried and true shonen tropes that have made everything seem unoriginal. Slave B tries to follow in the footsteps of more popular series, but inadvertently creates multiple pale carbon copies of characters from those series. Anyone who has a passing knowledge of bigger and better series will quickly find someone that seems like a bastardized version of a more popular character. When looking at how good a story is, we must remember that there is both a micro and macro perspective. On the micro level, we look at the people within the story and their interpersonal relationships. On this level, Slave B is okay. Some of the characters are definitely alright on their own, but every one of them feels incomplete, if not wasted. The characters feel like skeletons or templates of what could be, but the writer is unable to make them interesting or likable to any respectable degree. If that was the only issue, however, Slave B wouldn't be so mediocre. No, instead what makes it so disappointing is when we move over to a larger macro perspective of the story. From the get-go, if we look at the romance version of the story, the plot makes sense. It's obvious what the desired highs and lows are, and given a flashcard version of the story, you might say that we can reach those peaks and valleys. The problem comes from the lack of build-up to achieve the wanted payoff. The framework of the story might be decent, but when the work itself is bare bones, it is hard to feel satisfied by the twist or the reveal. The writer tries to make the universe of Slave B feel grand, but fails to fill it with interesting enough elements to make it so. The villains, and especially the surprise villains, fails to make an impact because of how inconsistent their behavior is, and how their story beats really don't make sense if you take a single step back. In some sense, Slave B tries too hard to try to get to a destination, while completely ignoring the importance of the journey itself. A common joke you may have heard is that the real treasure is the friends you made along the way, and while it may be a comedic way to alleviate the disappointment from a story's ending, in the case of Slave B, the problem is that we made it to the end and are still wholly unsatisfied with both the journey or the destination. Once again, you may be wondering why I picked Slave B as a topic to talk about, especially as it feels like I've been mainly shitting on the series for the past few minutes. But it's precisely because of its mediocrity that makes it so fascinating. If you love feeling moderately excited but never reach climax, then this is the series for you. With its okay characters, okay story, okay art, okay world, then this is the perfect time waster. Some say that when you set goals, you should set a little further than what is actually desired so that you inadvertently fulfill the actual needed goal. Like setting a goal of a 1.5 kilometer run instead of a 1 kilometer run. In this case, Slave B set for itself a grade of B and got itself a C. At the very least, Slave B might serve well as a measuring stick. Anything better in it is good, while anything worse in it can be safely thrown into the garbage can. Thanks for watching.